Imagine you're always there. You respond to every message instantly. You show up to every call. You're available, predictable, reliable. At first, that kind of availability feels like love, like connection. But over time, something strange starts to happen. It begins to feel like background noise. The value you offer starts to fade into the texture of her life, like wallpaper. It's there, it's consistent, but it no longer provokes any emotional movement. And that's a problem, because when something becomes completely predictable, it becomes easy to take for granted. You see, human beings, especially in the realm of relationships, don't respond deeply to what's static. We respond to contrast, to change, to movement. If you're always the same, always showing up in the exact same way, always saying yes, always saying good morning at the same time every day like clockwork, there's no tension. And without tension, there's no curiosity. Without curiosity, there's no worry. And without worry, there's no urgency. And that urgency, that subtle worry, that's what often signals to someone that they care, that they're emotionally invested. So what happens when you disrupt that predictability just a little? Not in a cruel or chaotic way, not by ghosting or playing games, but by introducing a sense that you are not entirely within reach all the time. Maybe you don't answer the message right away. Maybe you're not always the one to initiate the conversation. Maybe you skip the usual check-in without explanation. Suddenly, there's a silence where a signal used to be. And in that silence, the mind starts to wonder. Is he okay? Is something wrong? Did I do something? These aren't malicious thoughts. They're the mind attempting to fill in a gap that it's not used to navigating. And in that gap, emotional investment starts to deepen. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about faking disinterest or punishing someone with distance. It's about reestablishing polarity. Because if you're constantly showing up in the exact same way, you begin to lose the very thing that likely made her attracted to you in the first place: your autonomy, your self, containment, your life, your direction, your mission. The moment you become entirely absorbed into her world, into her emotional rhythms, you lose the edge that made you captivating. You shift from being a storm on the horizon to just more comfortable weather. She stops looking for the signs of change in you because she assumes you've settled into a pattern. You've become predictable and therefore emotionally neutral. Now think about the opposite. Imagine you are a man who has his own gravitational pull. A man whose patterns are not always so easy to predict, not because you're erratic, but because you are alive, because you are focused, because sometimes your attention is on things that matter to you beyond her. That creates space, and in that space, something deeply human happens. She starts to care more, she starts to think more, she starts to worry, not in a panicked or toxic way, but in that subtle, concerned, checking, in kind of way. She wants to know you're okay. She wants to feel connected again, and that desire, that emotional reach is a sign that she's emotionally tethered, that you matter. If you're always where she left you, she'll stop looking. But if you move just enough to make her look up, you've done something powerful. You've reminded her that you're not something she owns. You're something she could lose. People think they have to explain everything. They think if someone's worried or curious or even just slightly unsure, they have a responsibility to lay it all out, to give answers, to provide emotional closure for every mood or movement. But the truth is, part of being a compelling person, someone who draws attention and concern, is in learning how to hold things back, not in a deceptive way, not in a manipulative way, but with restraint, with quiet discipline, because silence, when it's earned, speaks louder than any explanation. Now consider this: if you're visibly going through something, if your mood shifts, if your focus turns inward, if you carry yourself with a kind of quiet weight, it signals to the people around you that there is depth in you that they don't fully understand, that there's something happening behind your eyes that isn't immediately accessible, and people notice that. Especially a woman who's emotionally invested in you. She'll notice the change. She'll notice the way you're looking at your coffee longer than usual, or the way you answer her questions with less color in your voice, she'll sense that something is moving underneath. And because you haven't said anything, because you haven't immediately opened the vault, her mind begins to work. It begins to wonder, now, this isn't about being moody for the sake of it. This isn't about acting depressed or becoming emotionally unavailable. It's about cultivating a kind of internal life that isn't always on display. A man should have a part of himself that's not up for discussion, a room in the house of his mind that doesn't get tours. That doesn't mean you're cold. It means you're not needy. It means you don't offer up your whole emotional map just because someone asks for directions. Women, like most emotionally intelligent people, pick up on subtlety. You don't have to say, I'm going through something. She'll feel it. She'll see it in how you pause, in how you look at her, in how you respond. And the fact that you don't explain it right away, that you don't dump your process onto her lap, does something important. It activates her emotional intuition. It pulls her in. It makes her worry in the best way. Not because you're manipulating her, but because you're revealing, without revealing, that your world doesn't revolve entirely around her approval. That you're dealing with something, and that tension, that sense of distance within proximity, it creates gravity. It draws her closer. See, when everything is out in the open, when every feeling is dissected, every thought shared, there's no room left for her to feel her own feelings about you. You've already told her how to think, but when you carry your silence with strength, not withdrawal, not passive aggression, but silent strength, she starts to wonder what's going on. She'll ask, she'll lean in. And even if you give her nothing more than a half smile and a quiet, I'm working through some things, it holds weight. It means something because she knows there's more, and the more matters. That's how you get someone to care without demanding it. You build presence. You hold your own energy. You don't seek constant emotional hand holding. You become someone who can sit with his own thoughts without asking the world to validate them. And in doing so, you create an invisible pull, one that doesn't beg for attention but earns it naturally and unavoidably. Let them wonder, because wonder leads to worry, and worry leads to value. There's something unsettling that happens when you start improving your life without broadcasting it. When you begin moving forward, quietly getting in shape, leveling up your career, handling your finances, expanding your mind. Without asking for applause, it sends a message, a subtle one that says, I'm not standing still, And that message, whether people admit it or not, creates discomfort in those who had grown used to your previous level, especially someone emotionally connected to you. You see, the moment you shift from being the man who talks about his potential to the man who simply begins embodying it, you change the terms of your relationships. You become someone who is no longer orbiting another person's world. You begin creating your own gravitational field. And when a woman senses that, when she starts noticing that you're not quite as available, not because you're avoiding her, but because you're occupied with something bigger than her that's when something powerful kicks in. That's when worry begins to seep in, but it's not just worry in the petty sense. It's not jealousy or fear of loss in the shallow way. It's a deeper emotional alert, something internal in her that realizes you're not where she left you. You're growing, evolving, quietly building something without needing her eyes on you to validate it. That signals independence, and independence, when it's real, threatens the part of her that thought she fully understood you. Now, the mistake many men make is announcing their growth like it's a press release. They want credit, they want reassurance, they want a reaction, and when they don't get the validation they hoped for, they spiral back into stagnation. But here's the truth. The most compelling growth is the kind that doesn't need to be seen. It just is. You're in the gym when no one's looking. You're investing in your future when it's not flashy. You're reading, learning, refining your thinking while everyone else is scrolling. You're changing the architecture of your life in a way that doesn't ask for permission. And you'll notice something fascinating happen when you do that. People will start asking subtle questions. "You've been busy lately. You seem different. What have you been up to?" She'll notice the change in your energy before she sees the tangible results. That's the irony of it. It's not just about the physical or financial gains. It's the presence, the quiet confidence, the way you carry yourself when you're no longer seeking to be chosen, but are choosing yourself. She'll worry not because you're withdrawing love, but because you're becoming more valuable. In doing so without her guidance, and that's a threat to her subconscious sense of control. That's when she starts to lean in. That's when she starts to wonder what's pulling you forward. She'll begin to suspect, maybe even fear, that someone else might notice this new version of you before she reclaims her place in your story. And that worry, that's the recalibration. That's the moment she begins to realize that loving you isn't passive. It requires presence, effort, and attention, just like the effort you're putting into your own life. You want to become someone who doesn't just talk about change, but embodies it so fully that people begin to feel left behind if they're not keeping up. Not because you're trying to leave them, but because you're refusing to stay behind. The most worrying thing you can do to someone who's grown used to your stillness is to start moving. There's a strange kind of power in silence, and I don't mean total silence or emotional coldness. I mean the deliberate withdrawal of something that used to be there. When you used to affirm her, when you used to say good morning every day, send little compliments, check in often, offer that kind of constant emotional presence, and then one day it changes slightly. Not with anger, not with resentment, just less, a little more space in between, a little more stillness where there used to be warmth. That change, however small, is noticed immediately. And what most men don't understand is that women are hypersensitive to emotional shifts. They're tuned in to the rhythm of your attention. They feel it when it cools, even by a few degrees. And when that happens, something inside her starts scanning the environment. What changed? Why does he feel more distant? Did I do something wrong? Is there someone else? That spiral begins. Not because you've mistreated her, but because you've disturbed the emotional pattern. And that's precisely the point. Because if you're always giving, always validating, always making her feel safe and adored and seen, she will feel emotionally full. But that fullness can become complacency. If she knows without question that you'll always be there, always affirming her worth, always prioritizing her feelings, then eventually, whether she realizes it or not, she'll stop reaching for it, she'll stop valuing it. Because anything that's guaranteed becomes background noise. But when you start withdrawing some of that validation, just a little, not to punish, but to recenter yourself, it disrupts that emotional pattern. It introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty demands attention. It makes her stop and re-engage. It forces her to ask herself, what's happening here? That moment of confusion, of emotional pause, is the moment where worry starts. And worry, in this context, is a signal that she cares. See, people chase the things they feel slipping away. And when you're always available, always open, always pouring yourself out, there's nothing to chase. There's no tension, and relationships need that tension to stay alive, not chaos, not mind games, but a kind of polarity. A subtle push and pull that keeps both people reaching, not just sitting still in assumed comfort. And if you've been the type to always reassure, always soften every moment of tension, always give her the emotional clarity she wants the second she wants it, then you're probably not as respected as you could be. Because respect, real respect, is born from not needing approval. It comes from standing firm, from not always being emotionally available, from occasionally letting the space between you speak louder than your words ever could. And this is important. It's not about withholding love. It's not about creating anxiety just to feel powerful. It's about reminding her and yourself that your presence is not a given, your attention is not infinite, that you are not some emotional faucet she can turn on at will. You are a man with his own gravity, and when you pull back slightly, the ones who care will feel that pull and start leaning in again. The warmth you used to offer, when you pull it back slightly, becomes more noticeable, more meaningful, more asterisk missed asterisk. That's how you know you had value in the first place. The moment she notices you've gone quieter is the moment she realizes how loud your presence really was. There's a subtle art to emotional presence, a way of showing affection without handing over your whole emotional world. And that art is in learning to be there, to care, to love even, but with a certain kind of distance. A certain space, not the kind that pushes someone away or builds walls, but the kind that leaves room for mystery, for uncertainty, for that very human feeling of wondering what's really going on inside you. You can look someone in the eyes and be warm, attentive, even tender, and still leave them with the sense that something's going on behind the curtain, that your mind is occupied, that you're processing, that you're carrying something you're not ready to unpack just yet. And that creates a tension, a meaningful one that makes her ask, is everything okay? Not out of fear, but out of investment, because she feels the difference, she feels the shift. She knows your heart is still open, but your mind? It's somewhere else, and that distance, not emotional coldness, but emotional asterisk wait asterisk. It triggers a quiet worry. She starts checking in more. She starts watching you a little more closely. She starts asking questions she didn't ask before. Because she wants to understand you again. That's important. You've made her asterisk want asterisk to understand you again. See, when everything is always fully expressed, when you're always transparent, always explaining, always open, it creates a kind of emotional flatness. There's no edge, no intrigue, no depth left to explore. And when there's nothing left to explore, there's no reason to lean in. But when you offer just enough closeness to be felt, and just enough distance to provoke thought, you create a dynamic where connection is never fully settled. It's always being earned, always being navigated. That's what keeps people emotionally alive in relationships. Not certainty, but engagement. People confuse love with full disclosure. They think, if I really care about someone, I should tell them everything. I should always be present, always open, always responsive. But too much presence can become suffocating. Too much emotional openness can become predictable. You become emotionally flat, not because you lack depth, but because you've made all of your depth visible. You've put it all on the table. There's nothing left for her to wonder about, nothing for her to reach toward. But when you maintain a part of yourself that's not fully explained, when your affection is steady but your thoughts are sometimes elsewhere, she feels that, and the emotional current of the relationship starts to shift. She becomes the one leaning forward. She becomes the one checking in, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your focus, your energy is directed towards something she can't fully access. That's not manipulation. That's polarity. That's what makes relationships feel alive. That subtle, quiet sense that the other person still has a private world, an inner life that isn't entirely yours to see. And when you balance that properly, when your love is real but your focus is not always in her hands, she won't be able to ignore you. She'll feel the absence in the room even when you're sitting beside her. She'll feel the emotional noise that silence can create when it's coming from someone she doesn't want to lose. And that's the essence of it. You don't have to pull away to punish. You just have to stop making her your center. Keep loving, keep caring, but live a life that's emotionally independent enough that she has to work to stay in tune with it. Let her feel you close, and still wonder where your mind is drifting when you go quiet. There comes a point where you have to stop trying to be understood, where you stop handing people a manual for how to interpret you, how to feel about you, how to respond to you. Because the more you explain yourself, the more you justify your behavior, your silence, your focus, your choices, the less gravity you hold. When you constantly clarify yourself, you chip away at your mystery. You reduce your complexity to a formula, and nothing worth being drawn to is that simple. This isn't about being cryptic or aloof for no reason. It's about recognizing that you don't need to be constantly interpreted to be valuable. In fact, sometimes the most compelling thing you can do, the most disruptive thing, is to let people feel your presence without giving them the full explanation behind it. You don't owe anyone a running commentary on your emotional life. You don't have to constantly narrate your intentions. If you're always trying to make someone feel secure by over-explaining your every move, eventually they stop trying to read you. They stop being curious. They stop reaching, and what happens then? You become passive in their world, fully decoded, fully predictable, fully safe. And while that might sound comforting on the surface, it kills tension. It erases the unknown. It drains the relationship of that vital polarity, the emotional charge that keeps both people invested. So what do you do instead? You hold. You move through your world without feeling the need to explain your pace. You let your silence speak when words would only dilute your position. And when she asks, "What are you thinking?" you don't always answer, not because you're playing games, but because you're living asterisk. Because your mind is occupied with things she might not fully understand, and that's okay. That's what creates depth. That's what creates worry, not through cruelty, but through presence. Because when a woman feels something but doesn't quite know what it means, her mind stays engaged. She starts to watch more closely. She starts to evaluate your signals, and that's not manipulation. That's human psychology. People think they want certainty, but they chase ambiguity. They chase the things they can't quite grasp. The moment she feels like she knows exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, she stops emotionally investing. But when she has to interpret, to question, to observe, she leans in. That's why you don't give away all your reasons. You don't explain every change in your tone. You let her feel it, because if she cares, she'll want to figure it out, she'll worry, she'll ask questions, and even if you don't answer all of them, you've already done something important. You've created space for her to pursue you emotionally. Now, this doesn't mean you become emotionally unavailable. That's not what this is about. It means you stop being emotionally predictable. You stop being so open that there's nothing left to discover. And you let her see that you are, in fact, someone she could lose, not because you threaten her, but because you move with self-respect, because you value your energy, because you are no longer a man waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And that kind of man, quiet, focused, unbothered, composed, he doesn't need to explain why he's valuable. He simply is. Let her figure out why you're silent, and let that silence say everything she's afraid to hear.